everyone. Welcome to my show, CurryUp Leadership Podcast, a podcast to spotlight purpose-driven Asian leaders making an impact. And this is your host, Priyanka Komla, joining you on our 106th episode of CurryUp Leadership Podcast. We truly appreciate each one of you for your feedback and support that has brought us all along in the storytelling process. So super excited to have another interesting guest on our show. And as a quick reminder, follow me, Priyanka Komla, and a CurryUp Leadership Podcast page on LinkedIn to receive our LinkedIn Live notifications. We go live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern to bring some of the best Asian stories into the spotlight. For those who are watching us on YouTube, do give us a like and subscribe so you get notifications. And to all our podcast lovers hearing this on any podcast streaming platform, follow us and give us a review and rating to help us understand how this podcast is helping you become a better version of yourself. Without further ado, I have a special guest who's going to talk about finding opportunity in chaos. My special guest for the day is Steven Khuong, who's joining us from San Francisco. Hey, Steven, welcome to the show.
Priyanka, how are you? Happy Easter for all those that are celebrating Easter today. Really excited to be on your show, and thank you for having me as a guest.
That's awesome. I love Easter eggs and, the egg hunt, that keeps us going and be more childlike in our life. So thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Steven.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So to our listeners, Steven Khuong is a fintech startup entrepreneur. He's a co-founder and CEO of Curacubby, which is a leading integrated payments and business platform for schools of all sizes. He's a thought leader in operations and process management and has been featured in national media, including New York Times, CNN, and Forbes.com, and now on CurryUp Leadership Podcast. How does it feel being on this whirlwind of always being on spotlight as an entrepreneur?
Well, thank you. I'm humbled by your nice introduction of me. It's interesting. On one hand, I love representing our company and what we're doing. But then on the other hand, it becomes challenging every day to try to maintain everything and keeping everything balanced. As you know, as a startup entrepreneur, as a business operator, things are always changing. So it's almost like for every one or two steps you take forward, you kind of have to take one step back to reconcile and rethink and recalibrate. So that's the life of an entrepreneur.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And we have a lot of other facets of Steven that I'm going to explore and unveil in this podcast. So I'm super excited. And for our listeners who are joining this on live or on replay, please drop in a quick hello and the country that you're tuning in from. One lucky listener is going to get a free one-on-one with Steven himself. What better way than get a giveaway in every single episode of ours? So Steven, something that's very fascinating about you before I go into your journey from Vietnam into to the US, you are fascinated by astrology. That's something that was very intriguing about you. And, I was very intrigued because, as a startup entrepreneur, you're always data driven. You're talking about analytics, numbers. How did you pivot into astrology, and how is that helping you as a startup entrepreneur?
Oh, wow. Thank you for raising that. So I don't know what it is. Ever since I was a child, I've been fascinated with the occult and with ancient traditions and how people make meaning of life and meaning of relationships through something that's greater than maybe a higher power, a spiritual power. I don't know what it is, but those things are very grounding for me. So I've always kind of as a kid just went through the various astrology media and just kind of like picked at it and had fun. But I think interestingly enough, because of COVID, we were like in an isolated environment. So I had a little bit more time to just dig deeper into it. So I would say the last 18, 22 months, I've been really fascinated by it and spent a significant amount of time on my off hours just studying it. And it's been fascinating, very, very fascinating. And I can use some of that to relate to some of my colleagues, my friends, and it's just helped me get a better sense of who I am and stay a little bit more grounded as well.
That's very interesting, Steven. As an entrepreneur, sometimes you need to have that spiritual sense of there's something higher than all of us, right? That keeps us going sometimes.
Definitely, especially being an entrepreneur in tech, you definitely need something a little bit higher than yourself to keep you going.
That's very true. We have a handful of live listeners joining us. Hello, hello, welcome to the show. Please drop in a quick hello and the country that you're tuning in from, so Stephen gets a chance to know who his listeners are. So, Stephen, let me ask you this. When you look at your journey as an Asian, you were born in Vietnam, then you moved to the US at the age of 3. When you look back at your journey, having crossed so many milestones now as an entrepreneur who's in the media spotlight, what is one thing, one unique value that you always believed in that has led to your success today?
Wow, that's a great question. Priyanka, it's interesting as Asians, culturally speaking, and I don't mean to generalize, but I think culturally speaking, we're always taught to be humble. We're always taught to grind, but not talk about it. And it's just a matter of duty to the family. As a child, your duty is to honor your parents, to honor your grandparents, honor your ancestors. So I didn't think much about, the adversity that I've kind of went through, being a refugee. We're Chinese descent, but my family lived in Vietnam. I was born there, immigrated to the US when I was roughly 3 years old, moved to Michigan, and ultimately traveled to California. I grew up in Oakland. And, there was a lot of assimilation that I had to do. Being in Michigan, we were probably the only non-white in the entire metro. Moving to Oakland, it was, the schools that I went to were mostly Black. So there was a lot of assimilation. And I think it was actually, in hindsight, it was actually difficult trying to assimilate, trying to fit in. In Oakland, it was all about, at that time, it was like during like what I would consider the golden age of hip hop, when hip hop music was really starting to brew. And, I find myself thinking about, how I navigated through those circumstances. And it's, there's some painful moments, but I think overall, I was able to make the best out of my situation and really find opportunity within the adversity. So we can talk about that a little bit later as we dig a little bit deeper into my previous life doing music.
I know, I love that part of it. A hip hop music producer turned fintech entrepreneur. What a great paradigm shift you've been through.
Yeah. Can we say hello? We just give a couple of shout outs to
Yep.
Eileen in El Paso. That's a good friend of
Yep.
mine.
So we have Lupe Garcia who's saying hi. Hi, Lupe.
Hey, Lupe, all the way from El
And
Paso.
yep, and we have Annie Haddock who's joining us from Ontario, Canada. Hey, Annie.
Annie, thanks for joining us.
And we have Eileen Lozano who's watching us from El Paso, Texas, who says hi, Stephen.
Yeah, those are my my wonderful friends in Texas. They are part of the reason why I'm, if I'm remotely successful, it's because of all of the people that back me up. So I love these people.
That's awesome. And thank you so much for joining us. It means a lot when you have a tribe of people who are always supporting and cheering for you.
Yeah, you can't do it without it. I think so often we think that we're on this journey alone in this world. And even, in our darkest moments, in our most lonely moments, it's important to remember we're never alone. And people are always supporting us, spiritually, emotionally. They're always there. So I think that's one really a strong takeaway from my childhood as well. As I think back, there's always been people there, holding me up.
That's something that we all need. And I would encourage all of you to find your tribe. That's something that keeps us going when we have adversity. Now let's talk about fintech. I'm super excited to learn more about Curacubby. So before we dive into this, Stephen, talk to us about the state of fintech in the US as well as at a global scale.
Yeah, the best way for me to describe fintech right now is that fintech is touching every industry possible. When you think about e-commerce, there's a fintech component. When you're thinking about direct-to-consumer banking, there's fintech. When you're talking about even vertical SaaS platforms, there's fintech involved in everything. The opportunity now is for two sides. On the legacy side, on the banking institutional side, there's an opportunity for these players to really step up and embrace some of the more radical ideas that are coming through. We know about crypto. It's been around for a couple of years, but I think even beyond that, there are some very, very unique niche problems that could be solved by partnering with some of the legacy players. And then, on the entrepreneurial side, there is a great opportunity too to think about fintech outside of fintech. So for example, our company is a great example of that. We solve problems for schools, right? But the way that we look at it, almost at every intersection of school administration, there's potentially a commerce-enabled component within that workflow stage. So we have done a good job of thinking about fintech outside of what someone would traditionally think as just a banking relationship or a payments relationship. We really think about fintech as a component of solving a bigger problem. I mean, look, with the pandemic, right? Most of the country has gone from cash to checking basis onto a digital payments basis. So that's one example. PayPal comes to mind as a company that really took advantage of that chaos to revolutionize their top line revenues as well. So yeah, when I talk about fintech, state of fintech, the world is pretty much yours to grab right now if you have the correct set of solutions for the problems.
That's very interesting to hear. What is an opportunity that you're very excited about when you look at the future of fintech?
Wow, that's a really great question. I would say integrated payments, or I would another way to think about that is commerce-enabled workflow. So again, I'll use our company for example. We provide services to schools of all sizes. We solve problems such as compliance reporting, application, online registration, tuition management. So all of those things really accelerate the school's back office in terms of, getting cash flow faster, getting enrollment online. All of those things we're solving for. But if you think about it, each piece of those specific stage in the workflow requires an embedded payment portion. Like it's very difficult to have a family sign up a Google form and then redirect them to the PayPal link. So I know it sounds like it's just one step, but oftentimes that one step can cause the user experience to deteriorate, and that particular extra step can make that potential player drop. So
and that's a very interesting point, because sometimes from my own personal experience, you change your mind in that one quick moment where you're transitioning from that page to your payment page, right? So streamlining that experience would really help you get your user to make the payment rather than giving them that moment of, should I do this or not?
Yeah, we're talking about the differences in clicks can change the opportunity to either increase or decrease your top line revenue, just one click.
Right, it's the consumer's buyer's choice, right?
It is.
It's very finicky.
Extremely, yeah. So yeah, going back to your question, I think the opportunity is in embedded payments within workflow, and to the extent that you can verticalize that across many industries. There's construction, retail, food, education. Those are some examples of various vertical industries that you can play, but I think you can play into almost any vertical industry.
That's very interesting to hear. So what advice would you have for our listeners who are interested in pursuing a career in fintech? Where should they start? Is there a specific set of prerequisite skills that you're looking for when you're hiring people for your startup?
Yeah, I can address this from two sides, right? So from the startup founder side, I think it's absolutely critical that you become intimately involved with the problem set before you think about solving something. Because I think oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we look at the opportunity and say, okay, wow, this is a great idea, we should just do it, without first being involved in the problem, right? So again, using our example at Curacubby, prior to founding the software company, I helped found a school for children with special needs. And it was in that context that we actually experienced all of these problems. And they were like huge problems, dynamic problems. And in trying to solve those problems, we then became intimately involved with how the problem set should be appropriately solved. So that's, my 2 cents to entrepreneurs. Be sure you are in the problem. Like roll your sleeves up, put your arm in mud, and get dirty with the problem. On the other side, in terms of users, I think you have to try to make it as simple as possible. So even though we are talking about fintech, to the extent that you can make it non-fintech for the users, that's better.
Right, because for the end users, right, they don't care about, the industry or the type of solution. All they need is just like, I need a solution for my problem.
Yes, and make it easy, super simple and easy. Yeah,
Very
we're learning. We had a product. The prototype stems back about 5 years, and even to this date, some of our listeners are, I think some of our employees here as well. They've had to deal with all kinds of legacy issues, like moving into 2021. The user base is expecting more simplification. They're expecting better ease of use. So we're trying our best at how do we take a 2-step UX down to a 1-step UX. So all of those things are always on top of mind for us.
That's very important as well. So before I jump and learn more about Curacubby, given that some of your tribe and employees are on the live, here's a request for all of you guys who are watching this. In one word, how would you describe Steven as a friend, as a mentor, as a boss at work? And the reason why I'm asking this is I have a fun rapid fire round towards the end. So I'm going to kind of get all these different perspectives about Steven. It's a fun Easter gift for you, Steven.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So please drop in the chat on YouTube or LinkedIn, just one word to describe Steven. And with that, I'm going to acknowledge a couple of other live listeners who've joined us. We have Satya K, who's joined us from India. Hey, Satya, welcome to the show. And we have Harsha Sastri, who's also joining us, who says, good questions and interaction, great episode. Thank you, Harsha. All right, see, I have the responses pouring in, which we'll get to at the towards the end of the show on more things about Steven from his tribe. So, Steven, going back to our Curacubby discussion, in one line, how would you describe your startup, Curacubby?
Curacubby is an integrated payments and business platform to help schools of all sizes optimize their operations.
I love your rapid fire answers.
Thank you.
And something that I'm very curious about, how did you coin this name Curacubby? Is there a backstory to it?
Well, there's a short answer and then there's a real answer. Okay, the short answer was the URL domain name was available. That's a short answer. Okay,
that's how most of the best startups come into existence, right?
Right, and the real answer is that we were when we first built the product, it was really designed for early education and preschools, and we just wanted to do a play on words. And we're like, okay, if you're a child, when you come to the school, where's the place where you would put all your precious stuff? It's in the cubby, right? You just go, you put your jacket in the cubby, you put your lunchbox in the cubby. And then we thought, wow, what would be like another word another way to identify this cubby from the administrator standpoint. So we're like, let's look for Latin words. So we were looking for Latin words, and the cura in Latin is administrator or curator, so the administrator's cubby. So ultimately, we're the place where school administrators will entrust all of their most valuable data.
I love the cubby story behind it. It's fun from the student's perspective as well as the administrative staff perspective as well. So let's get back to your Asian roots, where you talked about your influence through the influence of hip hop music in your life. So how did a hip hop musician producer turn into a startup entrepreneur? When did that moment of epiphany happen to you?
Yeah, Priyanka, this is an interesting story. So I talked about first immigrating from so we left Vietnam because there was a political turmoil. All of our family's property was being taken by the communist government, like literally overnight. So I don't remember any of this, but the story from my parents is that, a friend came and says that, you guys have to pack up all of your stuff tonight and leave, like on a boat, literally. So we traveled, I believe, to China, stayed in a refugee camp there for, I think, less than a year, ultimately landed in Hong Kong. And then when we were in Hong Kong, we were also in a refugee camp. And fortunately, we were sponsored by a Christian family in Michigan, so we ended up moving there. So in Michigan, we were the only non-whites there, and I guess for whatever reason, it was too cold. And my family says, "Okay, we're gonna find other Asian people somewhere in the country. We're gonna move there where it's warmer." So California, San Francisco happened to be the place. We had a family friend there that let us live with them for about a year. So interestingly enough, and I'll come back to the hip hop answer. Interestingly enough, when we think about discrimination, we only often think about racial discrimination, but there's also an underlying layer of discrimination even within the Asian community. So for example, when we first came to California, there were lots of Asians here, but we were discriminated because we were like fresh off the boat. We were refugees, and the Asians that were here were already third, fourth generation Chinese. So, they're like, we don't want to hang out with you. You're not like from here, you're from somewhere else. And these are like the Asian people here. So, elementary school, I remember like nobody wanted to be my friend. And then there was this kid, Trace Porter. He's of mixed descent. His father's black, his mother's white. He was like one of the first people that came with me and said, "Hey, I want to be your friend." And I was like, "Cool, let's be friends." And then as I experienced, my middle school and my high school years, I just realized that for what it's worth, all my friends were black because they just accepted me for like, okay, you're like this Chinese kid, but you're cool. You like our music. And I wanted so desperately to fit in. And I was really just trying to find a sense of who I am who I was and who I am at that moment. And really what really spoke to me was hip hop music, like the words, the context, the stories that was all coming out of the music. It really meant something to me. And I really identified with it, with the isolation, like being in the streets and all of that stuff. So ultimately, I told my mom, I was like, look, when I grow up, I want to be a DJ. And she's like, you're crazy. You're gonna go to school. You're gonna be a doctor or a lawyer. And I said, no, I'm gonna be a DJ. So
hey, come on, this is a conversation with an Asian mom, right? You got to fit into the STEM category.
Oh my God, exactly. So I was very rebellious. Fortunately, my father had a turntable. I don't know where he got it from, but I went and took my birthday money and I went and bought some records, and I just started to scratch on a turntable. And fast forward a year, I was already doing high school dances when I was in middle school, and I hooked up with a number of phenomenal rappers, and we formed a hip hop group. By the time I was 16 years old, we were already producing music, like out of my house, had a studio. And in 1995, we released our first album, closed caption, The Harvest. Ultimately, that was picked up and acquired by a distribution company. So essentially, I sold my record label, and I used that money to put myself through college. And upon graduating from college, something really cool came about. It was called the internet, and I thought, wow, what a cool thing. So I didn't want to leave the music industry, but at that time it was, just remember, like Tupac was killed, Biggie was killed. It was getting very violent, and I was even at a concert in San Francisco where I was performing, and gunshots rang out. And I remember carrying my records on my turntables, running out of there, fearing for my life. So that was like a warning sign that I just had to leave that scene. So serendipity, the internet came about. This is before Google, and I had an opportunity to join a startup to do technical recruiting in the Silicon Valley. I did that for a year, and then ultimately started my own company, which Rocket Staffing at that point was very successful as well. And then the economy crashed. So I had to pivot, and I went from technical recruiting back into something that was really meaningful to me as well, which is fitness. So side note, I was paralyzed with Guillain-Barré syndrome when I was in the 7th grade, so I couldn't walk. So fitness ultimately helped me get my self-esteem back and get me back into a positive state of growth. So I thought, here's a sign from the universe. The economy is crashing. People are going to be depressed. What can you do to contribute? Well, health and wellness is always something that everyone needs. So we started a fitness company, kept that one going for, almost 17 years. We sold it in 2019, right before the pandemic. And it was during that time that my son was diagnosed with autism, and we were looking for a school. We couldn't find one, so we built our own. And from the school, we learned about all the problems with fintech and education. And that was the inception of Curacubby. It's been a long journey.
I know. And, thanks for sharing that, very intimate candid story, of your son and how you've been looking at, how to solve some of the challenges that come around it. And, that's how the best entrepreneur stories come into limelight, right? It's not because you are here for the profits. I mean, that's just part of the process, but you're here on a mission to solve some of the pressing challenges. And sometimes they come from our own life. They stem from our own experiences.
Yeah, Priyanka, I think that's why we've just kept grinding. It was, we could have given up a long time ago. We were part of the InvestNet Yotli incubator, and I remember there were, 8 startup companies there. I think there's only 3 that are still around. So yeah, we could have waved our hands a long time ago, like, look, this is too hard, we're going to give up. But when you fight for a greater good or a greater mission, yeah, everybody loves profits. I love a good profit, right? But at the end of the day, if it's only profit driven, then you have the opportunity to bow out at any time. If it's mission driven, then there's something greater than the sense of self that's pushing you towards that goal.
I know, and thank you so much for sharing that story. It means a lot for us when we hear from our wonderful guests that there's a lot of challenges that they face in life that you don't get to see as part of your success. But I'm super honored. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Well, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I appreciate you giving me a platform to speak out about these things. It's not often that we get an opportunity, with more of an extended platform to share these things. A lot of time when you're in the press, they just give you like 60 seconds to tell your whole life story. So having an extended platform like this is really critical. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So tell us this, the theme of this episode that I wanted to get from you is, how do you find opportunity in chaos? As a parent, when you're dealing with certain life-changing challenges, and as a startup entrepreneur, when there's a lot of uncertainty, especially with COVID, what is one thing that keeps you grounded to find more opportunity, having that mission-driven approach?
Yeah, personally, I draw a lot of inspiration from my tribe. When I wake up in the morning, a million things are crossing my mind. Most of the things are like the things that I didn't do right from the previous week, and problems that we're going to encounter tomorrow. So I try to think about who's in this journey with me, so that I'm not alone. So like, Eileen is on this call, Lupe is on this call. These are the people that support me day in and day out. And I know that I'm not alone. And that's going to be the most important thing. And I'll say this again and again over this podcast, that as an entrepreneur, it is a lonely place, really, really lonely place. You basically have 2 duties. 1, to report to your investors, and 2, to make sure that all your employees can pay their rent and their mortgage. Those are the 2 overwhelming duties that we're burdened with every morning when we wake up. So when there's a lot of chaos or chaotic thinking, what I have done to ground myself is to think about my tribe and think about why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I want this to be a harmonizing effect where everyone wins. But at the same time, it's not all about me. It's about, hey, Eileen has amazing talents. Lupe has, all of this, technical skill set in her mind. I can draw these qualities from my tribe and they can help me. So having that as part of my faith is what gets me through the chaotic moments.
And this is something which I feel is golden nugget that all our listeners need to note it down when we face uncertainty, right? Because everybody has to go through the grind and hustle, but how do you keep yourself emotionally, mentally, physically balanced? That sets apart entrepreneurs like you, Steven.
Thank you so much. Oh,
awesome. So we have a flood of comments here, which I'm going to acknowledge. So we have a couple of live listeners also joining us, and Satya K says, very interesting interview. Thank you, Satya. We have Harsh Purohit, who's joining us from Richmond, Virginia. Hi, Harsh. Welcome to the show. We have Karthik, who's one of our new and loyal listeners of our show, who says, great session. And it's amazing to listen from someone who moved from hip-hop culture to being a technical person. Thank you, Karthik, for joining us from India. Quick comment from Annie, who says mission driven is what keeps things going during the downturns. And we have Harsh Purohit, who says 100% agree with that, Annie. And we have Ralph Gracie, who's joining us from Berkeley, who's giving us fist bumps, three fist bumps here.
I want to give a shout out to that. I know that's one of my best friends, Eduardo Fraga. He's with the Ralph Gracie team in Berkeley. That's been one of my best friends for, over 20 years. Eduardo, big shout out to you. You inspire me. He's an amazing jiu-jitsu instructor and competitor, one of my best friends.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us from Berkeley as well. And it's good to hear more about, people in your tribe, and they get to see the other side of you as well today.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So one last question I have for you, Steven, is how do you handle low moments in your life? You've talked about how do you ground yourself, but when there are moments where you want to give up, how do you personally handle it and with a smile?
Yeah, this happens all the time on a daily basis. There are low moments every single day. So I don't have all the answers, but this is one of the ways that I have dealt with it. It is cultivating a sense of, I know this sounds so cliche-ish, but I'll say it's mindfulness. I am finding myself meditating at least once a day, oftentimes 2 or 3 times a day. And it's just about discerning the difference between reality, feelings, and emotions. And oftentimes as individuals in high stress environments, we tend to think all 3 of those things are the same, but they're not. And they're really not. And, we have a choice too. We can choose happiness or we can choose despair, but that choice is not easy to make. So to the extent that we can ground ourselves through, closing our eyes and just breathing and just focusing on this is reality. Reality is right here, right now. If we project too far into the future, that becomes anxiousness. If we regress too far in the past, that becomes depression. So it's cognitive behavioral therapy, I think, ultimately. And we have to practice. And it is a practice. It's not like something that you can just think it through. You have to practice it through. And it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult. I hit those every single day. But again, I draw a lot of power and inspiration from my tribe, and I put them into my meditation as well.
I totally agree with this because, if I spend 10, 15 minutes every day, first thing meditating, I feel I'm in control of my day. Even when things don't go my way, you don't react immediately, but it takes a long period of practice where you just sit in calmness and, try to, not go into the past, not go into the future, but just stay in that moment. And, your brain is so fickle-minded, Steven. That's how we learn. It's like jumping like a monkey, and then you have to calm it down. And I'm in that mindful journey process as well, so I can really resonate with what you're saying.
It's so difficult. It is exactly right. It's like a monkey jumping from thought to thought, and it's very difficult to control.
I know. All right, so we've neared the end of the episode, so we have a fun rapid fire round for you. Are you ready for it?
Oh my God, rapid fire. Okay, let's do it.
And we're going to read out some of the answers from your tribe as to how do you describe Steven. So anybody else who's joined us live, who's not part of Steven's tribe yet, but have been inspired by his story, drop in one word in which, how you see Steven, as part of him sharing his story. And we're going to read them out in a quick couple of minutes. All right, so fun rapid fire round for you, Steven. Tell us the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the following, and in one word. Who's your role model?
2 people, Mark Brito, Gary Marino.
What does happiness mean to you?
Accepting change and choosing progress.
How do you define success?
Cultivating harmony for the greater good.
What is one fun thing about Steven that is exclusive to our CurryUp Leadership business? Maybe you can talk a little bit about your astrology as well.
I'm fascinated by astrology. It has really helped me understand myself better, as well as my relationship with other people. So
I'm curious, do you predict the future with astrology, given that you're trying to be in the present moment?
I do not predict the future. I don't use astrology as like destiny or fate. I use it as a way to understand various people's archetypes. So every zodiac has an archetype, and there's all these planets that aspect the zodiac. So to me, ultimately it becomes an algorithm, and it's super fascinating for me.
That's awesome. So our last question, and I'm going to read out some of your tribe's answers as well. And our last chance for some of our live listeners to share in one word, how do you see Steven? So Steven, the question for you is, what is your native language and one word to describe yourself in it?
My native language is Cantonese. That was the first language I learned. I can speak it. I cannot write it. I can speak it very limitedly now. Unfortunately, I wish I learned to write it. And then let's see, one word that describes me.
Mm-hmm.
Inquisitive.
That's awesome. So here I'm going to share your Easter gifts from your tribe. We have Eileen, and the question that I asked them was, how would you describe Steven in one word? So Steven is caring, is what Eileen is saying. And Eileen also says, he'll always show up for you. Lupe Garcia says, Steven is driven. That's awesome. Harsh, who is our CurryUp Leadership fan, says you're resilient. And Annie, who says, my first time listening to the show. I saw the pre-show live on LinkedIn half hour before, and I decided to have a listen. Thank you so much, Annie, for sharing that wonderful thought. Hey, the way we are trying to get our stories is working, Steven. So
it's working. We got to keep going. Yes.
I know. That's awesome. So those are some of the responses that were shared by your tribe.
Thank you. I'm super humbled by it. You guys are too kind.
Awesome, man. Annie also says her mother tongue is Cantonese too, and she can
really
write Chinese.
Okay, Annie, we got to hook up on LinkedIn. You have to teach me.
That's the best part, right? You can learn from our listeners as well. So the way Annie is describing you is Steven has a purpose. There you go.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, do follow Steven Khuong on LinkedIn. It's always nice for our guests to connect with our listener base as well. So feel free to send him a LinkedIn request there. And we have Richard Tien, who says, Steve's always been my role model.
Thank you,
Is that
Richard.
a surprise?
That's a surprise. I thought he hated me.
Hey, there you go. You never know.
Yeah.
We have one question from Karthik, if you would like to take this on.
Absolutely.
We discussed about our brain hopping from one thought to the other. What is one best practice that you can share with our listeners on that?
Wow, that's a really, really great question. I don't think I have like a definitive answer, but I can try to explain to you what I do. First, I will try meditation in the most practical way. Like I'll use the Calm app and just kind of follow the instructions. But I do oftentimes find a lot of like troubling thoughts that come into my mind, and when that happens, I will shut off the app and I'll open my eyes and I'll recite something to myself like, accept it, let it through, let all the horrible feelings come through, accept it, and let it pass. This too shall pass. And then you do that for 3 minutes, 5 minutes. You just get all of those things out, and then you go back to the meditation. So in other words, try not to resist those feelings and those thoughts.
Psychologically, that's what they say. You got to get those emotions into your body and sit with it rather than trying to resist it. Because the more you resist it, the more hard it's going to be for you to accept some of those feelings.
Yeah, Priyanka, I want to say this. Yesterday, I had a great conversation with an older gentleman. He's a really wise guy. And he told me something that I've never heard before. He said that as human beings, our capacity is to experience the full spectrum of feelings and emotions. Everything from sadness to anger to shame to uncertainty to doubt, all of these, it is part of our responsibility to experience the full spectrum. But for some reason, we were never given the okay as children to experience these things, right? As children, I was like, get it together, pick it up, let's keep going. Yeah, you can do this. Don't think about these things. And what he told me yesterday was like, hey, if you're feeling these things, it just means that you are tapping into the full spectrum of your capabilities. That's all that it means. And that was an aha moment for me. I never thought about it like that.
That's a very interesting, nugget that we all need to keep in mind, especially during these challenging COVID times. It's okay to be human and feel those feelings, because most times we feel like, oh, that's sadness, that's anger, and that's not my cup of tea.
Yes.
But then, that's what makes you human.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So that brings us to the end of our episode, Steven. This was such a wonderful, rendezvous for me, especially getting to know you and your hip hop journey, and now as a fintech entrepreneur. What are your parting thoughts to our listeners?
Well, one, I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to be in a time where there is a lot of chaos, because within chaos is where we seek opportunity. Priyanka, I want to thank you for hosting this amazing podcast to give Asian leaders an opportunity to express our gratitude and to share our experiences. So viewers out there, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the CurryUp Podcast. Find Priyanka on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. She's all over social media. And I just, I want to give a shout out to all of my friends that are here supporting me this morning, and all the new friends that I met on chat as well. You guys are amazing. And if I'm successful, it's because of my tribe, my inner tribe, and my extended tribe. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Steven. And drum roll, we have our free mentoring session, our one-on-one giveaway with Steven. And everybody's welcome to connect with Steven, but I have one lucky listener who's going to get a little bit of special treatment, right, as a CurryUp Leadership guest. And I'm going to give that away to Karthik for his question about, how do you get into this mindful state? And hope, Karthik, you will enjoy getting to know more of Steven. Karthik is from India and a recent listener of our CurryUp Leadership podcast, but he's been a loyal supporter of us. So we would love for him to get to know you better.
That's perfect. I look forward to it.
Awesome. So we'll connect you with Karthik. So Karthik, congratulations. And we have a couple of closing comments, which I'm going to read. Eileen says, great interview, Priyanka. Thank you. When I have an amazing guest like Steven, that makes it easier for me, huh?
Oh my gosh, I'm so humble. Thank you.
We have Satya who says, wonderful interview and informative. Thank you, Satya. We have Harsh Purohit who says, thanks, God bless everyone. And Lupa Gashia who says, I love seeing a new side to Steven, and I'm so grateful to work alongside him. And our lucky listener, there you go. He has a big comment here. Let's see if I can do a chat overlay. And okay, he says, listening to Steve's story, I feel inspired, and thanks for answering the questions. And both of you guys are amazing. So thank you so much, Karthik, for that wonderful share as well. And we'll connect you with Steven so you can claim your free mentoring session. So this was the 106th episode of CurryUp Leadership Podcast with Steven Khuong. And, for me, the key takeaway is being resilient amidst challenges. And it's hard, but that's how you create an impact in the society. So that's the one key takeaway that I'm going to leave our listeners with. Until another episode that's going to happen next Sunday. So we live stream every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So this could be your bedtime routine. We'll put you to sleep with wonderful stories from the Asian diaspora across the world. So to get all those notifications, you got to follow me, Priyanka Komla, and a CurryUp Leadership Podcast page on LinkedIn to receive your LinkedIn live notifications. So if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and give us a subscribe and a like. And for all our podcast lovers all over the world, give us a follow and a review and a rating. So this helps us understand how this podcast is helping you become a better version of yourself. Until another episode happening next Sunday with a tech leader with Hewlett Packard HP. We have Aarti Garg, who's going to share wonderful lessons from her tech journey. So we'll see you next week. And until then, this is your host, Priyanka Komla, signing off from CurryUp Leadership Podcast, a podcast to spotlight purpose-driven Asian leaders making an impact. Thank you. Thanks, Steven.
Thank you.
And thanks, everyone, for joining us.